want to know everything there is to know about you.
I am going to introduce me.
You must have spotted her by now. She's always there.
Don't I deserve love?
Somebody has to like me best.
Hello and welcome to the Don't Know Her podcast. I'm Scott.
And I'm Michael.
And we are here, as always, to talk about an icon of cinema who is not being sung about in the ways that they deserve to be. And today we have got an all-timer, one of the greatest living actors. Who are we talking about today, Michael?
We are talking about the one, the only, Alfre Woodard.
There's got to be something more out there for me. So I'm just going to go.
So Alfre was born in 1952 in Oklahoma. Acting, or so she says, wasn't really something she was that passionate about until, she was 15 or 16. And because of her ability to memorize lines, her nun teacher encouraged her, or forced her, it sounds like, to be in a play. And ever since then, she's been really, thank God for this nun.
Oh, bless you. God
Savior,
bless you.
Because Alfre, really took to it and went, did a lot of theatre post-school and got her breakthrough role in For Colored Girls in 1977 off Broadway, who got the attention of people like Robert Altman, who put her in his film Health. That was only her second film. Her third film, Cross Creek, is where she gets her Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress in 1983. And then from that point on, she mixes kind of mainstream sort of oriented movies like Scrooged with Bill Murray in 1988 with something more smaller with Passion Fish in 1992. On TV, she gets to play all sorts of characters from that point, like Winnie Mandela, through to people might know her best for her stint in Desperate Housewives. And she just, this woman has 17 Emmy nominations and 4 wins. She deserves all of that, if not more. And how that hasn't really translated to film, despite her being quite, prolific. She has made a lot of work. Doesn't really make sense to me, particularly now that we've, for this podcast, sat and looked back at her work.
It's undeniable. Alfre Woodard is undeniable, and therefore it's truly baffling that she is not hailed as one of the greatest living actresses, quite frankly. To me, it's as simple as that. Alfre Woodard is one of my favourite performers of all time, but it's just a piss take that she's not celebrated as an all-timer, and is therefore perfect for this podcast because she deserves so much more.
The other thing I would say about Alfre that is so important to her career and to her personality, or persona, if you want to say, is her interest in activism. So she has so many different causes and so many different, it just seems to kind of be part of her whole being to be interested in, as she refers to in interviews, like the tribe, like the community, which she refers to in all sorts of layers and all sorts of levels. And it does come across in a lot of the work she chooses to do and how she talks about it. One of my favorite things about her is that she, every year just before the Oscars, she hosts a sister soiree where she invites Black women in Hollywood to come together and celebrate all that they've achieved, regardless of who might have been Oscar nominated, who might have been Golden Globe nominated, etc., etc. She just wants it to be we are a group, we are a community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. She's one of a kind, and I could talk Alfre all day. But where did you first come upon Alfre?
So I would have seen her first noticed her first in Desperate Housewives. So season 2, she arrives as Betty, even Batty Applewood.
Applewhite.
She's Betty Applewhite. It's not a great character, but I do remember her and her presence alone, and her voice, and just this. She was great. She wasn't really utilized enough in that show, so I always liked her. And I remember, so Clemency went to Sundance, and I remember the reviews. And I once it was in the London Film Festival, I bought a ticket. I went and was blown away because she's amazing in this movie. But so there was something about her, even though I hadn't seen it necessarily on screen, more fool me because it does exist in previous work before Desperate Housewives and before Clemency. But for me, I hadn't experienced it. But I was so like hedging all my bets on Clemency being like, she is going to fulfill the promise of like, she's amazing. And what about you? How long have you been an Alfre stan?
Oh, I've been the same as you. Desperate Housewives was definitely the get-in. I did kind of go back through her filmography because, like other people we've done in this podcast, I seem to think I know them from an earlier point. But then looking back beyond or earlier than Desperate Housewives, I realised it definitely was Desperate Housewives. It was the first point. And I think that series was around about 2006. So that would make sense. And probably then thinking about her in that and then seeing her dotted throughout other bits and pieces like she so often is. But it was when I came to a film called Passion Fish, when I was in my teenage years, that I became wildly into Alfre Woodard. This was a film that nobody talks about. I'd never heard anybody mention this film before, even though it was nominated for lead actress for Mary McDonnell in that film. But there's something, so it's a John Sayles film. John Sayles, who also directed films like Lone Star. But Passion Fish is just the most gorgeous little film, very female-centric, which was quite unlike other things that John Sayles had done. And quite intentionally so, but I fully respect that he was making what was being described at the time as a woman's picture. But doing it in a really open-hearted way, it's wildly endearing and charming. It's just a wonderful thing. And I especially don't understand why gay audiences aren't screaming about this film, because it is about a really interesting female relationship, female friendship between Alfre's character and Mary McDonnell's character. And gosh, it's a wonderful thing. So it was from there for me where it really cemented an Alfre fandom that was going to last forever.
Yeah, Passion Fish is something that I only came to maybe a year ago or so. And it feels like a hug. Like even watching it now, like it's like this kind of gentle dramedy with Mary McDonnell playing an actor of a soap opera who is injured somehow. Do we find out how was she in a car crash? Do we know how she
was in a car accident? Yes.
Yeah, and so she has lost the ability to move her legs. And she decides to live in the South.
She returns home to where she was brought up in the South.
And she is impossible. So loads of nurses come and go, or carers, come and go, and then she lands on Alfre. And Alfre, for whatever reason, is sticking through to the end with this woman. Like, she is not leaving, no matter how awful Mary McDonnell can be, and she can be pretty bad. And they're both like kind of like rocks or something. Like, they do not budge. Like, they do not want to be supportive. They do not want to be friends. They don't want to be in the same house, really. But you see the layers peel off as they like get through their day, and it is a joy. Like Alfre, there is so much to it. But like meeting that man, like that romantic story that she has, and he's like,
"Oh, what's your name?"
Chantel.
Chantel what?
Chantel, who's got no time for French-talking Louisiana cowboys.
She basically is having nothing to do with this man. And it's the same with everything in her life. And you do discover, which is why I love the film, like they give her a lot of time. We find out a lot about her. We find out about her, where she was born, that she was relatively well off, because she has a really quite moving moment with Angela Bassett, who is a ex-colleague of Mary McDonnell and has come to visit and is then chatting with Alfre. And then Alfre's family come and visit. I won't spoil anything else, but there's a really lovely kind of, I don't know, like tone to it, and without it being too sentimental. It's just wonderful. And Mary McDonnell isn't someone I know very well. She's ripe for this podcast at some point, but
oh yes,
she's also like deserved that Oscar nomination for Best Actress. And Alfre deserved the Best Supporting Actress for sure.
Yeah, she should have been nominated.
Yeah, I would have probably given it to her, the award, but I think it was Marissa
Yeah.
Tomei in My Cousin Vinny, who is very good, but I think what Alfre is doing in that movie is what she does in a lot of her films, and I think Clemency is very similar. And like, she's a tough woman, and she's trying to do what is right in inverted commas, but there's like a vulnerability underneath.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing with Passion Fish, particularly, which made me sort of sit up and really pay attention, because Alfre Woodard is someone who brings such dimension and layers upon layers to almost all of her parts, and certainly when she gets these more leading roles where she gets a lot more to do. But there's something really unique about what she does in Passion Fish, which you then start to notice if you watch more of her. And this is what, for me, really makes her stand out from anyone else, is something about what she does with her eyes and how she portrays way, way more than what she's saying with her eyes. And quite specifically for her, it's after she delivers a line. So you were talking about that scene that she does with Angela Bassett, which is this amazing moment where you notice these two women have something in common in that they were both brought up in Chicago. And Alfre Woodard talking about, or Angela Bassett discovering from where Alfre grew up that she probably is from a more well-off background. And because she's then found herself down in this remote house looking after this ex-soap opera star in her house, it's kind of this wonder of why this has happened. And Alfre asks Angela's character,
You and her good friends? We spent a lot of time together. Work, you know. Yeah. You two seem to get along pretty well. We spend a lot of time together.
And then she says the line, and then her eyes tell a completely different story. It's like she conveys shock at what's fallen out of her mouth for maybe being so bold as to do that. But then you can see her questioning herself when she says it. It's just the most incredible thing. And I have noticed her doing it in other parts. She does it in Clemency a lot. She does it in Down in the Delta. It's this amazing thing. And I've not seen, or off the top of my head, I cannot think of anyone else doing it, where they say something and then they react to themselves saying it in their eyes, and it's unbelievable. It's amazing.
And the other thing, like, not that scene, but in general about Passion Fish, but like when you describing that, the emotion I get, which is all from that moment of her reaction to what she's saying, is a fear of like, I want more, because these two people are building a life together. But it's like, if one of them left, the other one's life would fall apart. And I think that's so well, like, it is Mary McDonnell as well, but Alfre is doing a lot of that, because she's the one that's stepped in to be the supportive one. And that scene is where I realized, like, you know, Mary McDonnell is meeting these old friends, and Alfre is not equal to them in social standing, let's say, in terms of she's not a soap star, she's not glitzy, she's not glamorous in that way within the movie. But I don't know, like, yeah, it's a joy. Like, Down in the Delta is like there's so much to say about that film too, and that's similar-ish to there's similarities between that and Passion Fish.
Yes, it's the only film that Maya Angelou actually directed, or certainly the only feature film. I think she had done a couple of other bits, but this was the only time that the incredible poet Maya Angelou took to directing a film, and has Alfre Woodard in the lead. And I can only assume that came from the relationship they hopefully built together on How to Make an American Quilt, where Maya Angelou played Alfre Woodard's mother in that film. And then in Down in the Delta, where she's directing, she casts Alfre in, again, one of her rare leading roles.
We meet her, and she is a single mother who has addiction problems. and it goes to the Delta.
Interestingly, I think it's the same, isn't it? Is it Chicago that the film opens in? Yeah, so it's a similar movement between Chicago and then going to where she was brought up, which is in the Mississippi Delta.
And so she goes to live with her uncle, with her children, and it's about her discovering herself and finding ways of being, really. So she helps her uncle in his coffee shop or cafe. I don't know what is the Americanism of a coffee shop or a cafe. Is that
a diner?
It's a diner.
Yeah, okay, it kind of is a diner, yeah.
And she, through the story, finds a way of becoming, like, she becomes an entrepreneur almost, and finds ways to make develop that business and make it her own with her uncle. It's a really moving, like, it's a very emotionally raw sort of movie. Like, I don't think it's perfect. There's a whole kind of backstory about a candelabra, which in theory works because it's connecting what's happening in contemporary America to, slavery and to history and colonialism. But it's just the way it's done it doesn't quite gel with what's happening outside of that story, for me anyway. But it is still beautiful, like, it's still effective. And yeah, Alfre's great leading that film. And as much as, like, it sounds very dramatic what I'm saying, like, she's a single mother who's an addict who goes back to, goes to her uncle in the countryside, but she doesn't lean into any of that. It is a much more sort of, I don't know, there's a lightness to her performance. Like, it's not judgmental. It's not playing for melodrama. She's kind of just delivering a great performance. And, we watch lots of films in general, and particularly for someone like Alfre Woodard. But, sitting and watching Down at the Delta, I did not expect in the middle of it to feel like I should jump up and shout back at the screen, because she is doing this, like, empowering speech to the people that are working in the cafe shop or the diner. And it's like,
everybody sit around wanting somebody else to do stuff for them. You got to do it for yourself.
For yourself. That's right.
So I'm asking you, can we do this for ourselves and for our children?
Can we do it? Yes, we can.
Can you do it?
And I was like, yes, we can. Like, I don't know. It's just so moving, that movie.
Yeah, I completely bought into it. I don't know why I wasn't expecting much from it. I should have, like Maya Angelou, I should have thought, you should trust this film. And I completely went with it. It really, really bowled me over. I think it's a good example of, for me, something that, again, Alfre does, is that she does straddle the line between sort of theatrical and theatricality in her performances versus this restraint, which is really, really powerful, the way that she can balance those two things. And in this, she's kind of handling these two things and letting them work off of each other, allowing her to play the leaning into the addict side of it and the alcoholic side of it, and her playing her in her drunken states, and that being very different from the moments of her being sober and leaning more into what her life is becoming. And just the way she holds her body, this physicality is so character specific. It's so well drawn. For something that I think in other hands might not have been, because the film certainly does. I know you're saying it's not melodramatic, but I think that is because of her. I think otherwise, in other hands, it would have really lent into the melodramatic. And with her, she just really grounds it and makes it fully fleshed out. It's really interesting stuff. I think it's aged interestingly. I'm not going to say badly, because I don't think it has. I think it's aged interestingly. I think it's a product of its time, and a product of its audience, perhaps, or its perceived audience, in that its soundtracking and all of these things feel very much geared towards a black audience, and of the time at which it was made, the late 90s. It's sort of leaning into a lot of late 90s R&B music and using that as part of the soundtrack, which is sometimes jarring with the what's going on screen. But then it does make it this really interesting time capsule piece. And I just thought it was mesmerizing. I have never seen anything like it, or certainly anything that feels like it. I really recommend Down in the Delta. I was so surprised by it. I think more than maybe anything else I watched for the first time doing this for Alfre, and just loved it.
It's interesting what you're saying about the audiences, because it was distributed by Miramax.
Okay.
So it's like looking at that and thinking of that and what that would have meant in the late 90s is, you know, an Oscar play. So essentially what we're talking there is a wide, business-minded audience in terms of awards play, but also like it would have all the right things for a Miramax like Oscar contender.
Yeah.
You know, in the same vein as like, I'm trying to think of like a Lasse Hallström sort of thing, like emotional.
Sure.
So I'm not sure. So I'm not sure how or what happened there. Maybe Harvey Weinstein, who we hate to talk about, had another fancy. Like that might have been a Mrs. Brown year or something. I can't off the top of my head know what else was on his slate. But it is an interesting one for what you're saying. It feels very much a 90s movie. And which also, to be honest, made me like it even more. Like there was something quite nostalgic about the whole experience of watching Down with the Delta.
No, but that's really interesting about the Miramax thing. I now seem to remember that coming up at the beginning, but that does make it more curious to me that it wasn't pushed. And it does read like you're right, it does read like a Miramax film, you know, very wholesome, interested in sort of human decency, inspiring and very encouraging in sort of the values of kindness. That's sort of the gist of it. And it really should have been hitting that Oscar mark, and especially that it was a Miramax picture. That's kind of even more frustrating.
Yes, and it had a like Toronto Film Festival release. Like it done all the right things for a film like that to have an Oscar moment, but for whatever reason, yes, it didn't happen. Another movie where she does go from a city to the countryside is Juanita. Juanita is, you know, written by her husband. Like it was a 2019 release, Netflix. Like I'd watched it back when it was first out, rewatched it for this. Like what a joy! And it's, you know, we have. Thankfully, you know, cinema and the industry is giving more opportunities for women over 60 to have stories told about them where they can, you know, want sex and relationships and have their own identity. You know, I'm thinking of things like Book Club or any that sort of thing. But Juanita feels particularly, I don't know, like it feels remarkable in some ways because it has just much more of a like, it's not so bland. For want of a better word. And I enjoy Book Club, but it's not like there's detail to it. Like there's a real like character there, and there's a real journey. There's meat to that story, which is not as, you know, it's not her reading 50 Shades of Grey and thinking, oh my God, I'm actually horny even though I'm old or older than you think. She really is going on a journey where she leaves her children because it's not working. Their relationship is not working out. So she leaves her kids to discover herself. So she gets on a bus in the first instance, right? And then she like happens to meet a fabulous character whose name I totally forgotten, but who is, you know, driving. She's a truck driver. She's this, you know, this butch lesbian character who, you know, I would watch a whole movie with that. And that's kind of my impression of the movie. Like there's all these bits that I enjoy a lot. So, and I know as a whole, it's not the best film ever made, but there is so much going on. Like the Blair Underwood stuff where, so she has these fantasies where Blair Underwood kind of performs at the start of as she likes, but then continuously asks her for money. And she has these pieces to camera where she's like,
shit, the only man I got just tried to borrow money from me. It ain't even real.
It just seems to be embracing a lot, and as light as it is, it just seems to be like a nourishing thing to watch again.
Yes. Oh, completely. And like you've said, it's maybe not as a whole the best thing ever. Halfway through the film, it sort of leans more into a romantic arc, and I think at that point it starts to lose its way. But yeah, just as you say, the first instance of her leaving the city to travel across the country and gets on this bus, and she has a musical number on this bus where she gets up and she starts singing, and the passengers join her in this rousing little number. If you turn on Juanita thinking you're getting something, you'll put it on and you'll be like, holy shit, I am not getting what I expected at all. And then she meets this truck driver character that you're talking about, and it's just this fabulous moment, them spending time together in this diner. She's feeling quite uptight to be meeting this new woman, but just decides to let it go, and she sparks up a cigarette, orders some booze, and they just have a great time together. It's so much fun. She is just bringing so much to this woman. She fully is embodying this character. It's an absolute delight, especially in the beginning, but it's a good time all round. It's definitely worth the watch.
I loved it, and written by her husband. What a gift. Apparently she was like, I don't want any Christmas or Valentine's Day presents or Thanksgiving or whatever, just write me a script. I'm grateful to watch all these films, but one film I'm really glad to have watched and discovered, because I'd never heard of it, was Miss Firecracker. And Miss Firecracker is this Holly Hunter starring film where she is determined to, I don't know if she wants to win, but she wants to take part in Miss Firecracker.
Oh no, she wants to win.
Oh, does she? For whatever reason in the film, she's not polished enough, she's not this, she's not that. She's just a really crazy girl in the town. And Alfre has such a joyful part as Popeye, who is costume designer, but she is I'm not sure that's what she is. But she is the aesthetic consultant for Holly Hunter's reign. Like, she does. I mean, she does. She makes the costumes, but I think the film wants you to believe she's not very good at it, right? Although she does pull some things out of the bag.
Yeah.
So she's in love with. So Tim Robbins enters as Holly Hunter's cousin, isn't it, or brother?
Yes, cousin. Mm-hmm.
He's like the sweatiest person I've ever seen in a film, and everybody, all the women are throwing themselves at this man, and which is a bit shocking to me. I mean, Tim Robbins is not an unattractive man, but in this movie, he's like filthy, and I'm sure there are other people around, like he's not the most handsome. But Alfre is just like speechless, and then decides the chat-up line that's best to use is her description of why she's called Popeye.
That's not my original name. I wasn't born with it. Actually, see, what happened was my brother, Lucky, he threw a handful of gravel in my eyes, and it was stinging. And then he gave me this little brown bottle of drops to put inside my eyes, telling me that it was drops for the eyes. In fact, it was drops for the ears, causing this burning sensation that made me scream out and cry like the devil. And I got me some glasses, and my eyes bulged out a little bit, and folks were just calling me Popeye, and the name kind of stuck with me, Popeye. That's how I got that name.
I was like, oh my God. She's just having such an amazing time.
Oh, it's so fun, and it's really fun to watch if, like us, you've come to Alfre in lots of other ways, and then stumbled upon this one quite late on, and she's getting to do something wildly different from what she's ever done before. She gets to really lean into a wonderful comedic talent, and it's just a hoot. She's really bubbly and sparky. And actually, if you watch interviews with Alfre, you register these traits that they do have in common. I always thought she was maybe quite intense and severe, like she comes across in many of her other parts. But no, she's really bubbly and fun and sweet-natured. And it's just lovely, and it's coming from this really sweet and earnest soul. It's a really lovely little film.
But yeah, what a treat. And then, but I don't think I've ever laughed quite as much as I did at Clemency.
Yeah, talking about the riotous laughter, Clemency's the one bringing that. We are just kidding, by the way. No, I think we should come to Clemency last of all. There's just one other. I mean, there's loads that you can watch. Alfre's career is massive, and probably quite unlike other people we have talked about and will talk about in this podcast. She is decorated, she is celebrated, but in terms of her talent, it's just not enough. So there are loads of films here that you can watch and you can go back to. But in terms of just one other one, which is very prolific and I guess quite important that we should touch on, is Spike Lee's Crooklyn, which is a 1993 Spike Lee joint, centered on a sort of semi-autobiographical tale of his upbringing in Brooklyn. But not directly so. It's not specifically talking about him as a youngster or anything. And it's actually centered on a young girl, and it's through her eyes. And I was totally blown away by this. I don't know why I wasn't expecting much, because it's a Spike Lee joint, so I should have actually been expecting a lot. And I was totally bowled over. So Alfre Woodard is playing the mother character in the film, looking at this family in Brooklyn. You've also got the wonderful Delroy Lindo, obnoxiously ignored this year for his fabulous work in Da 5 Bloods. Should have been nominated. Boo you all, you morons. But anyway, they're the mother and father in this film, and it's seen through the youngest daughter's eyes, even though I think there's 4 or 5 siblings. And it just plays out in this really fascinating way. I compared it to, quite curiously, like a Terence Davies film. I mean, wildly different, because Spike Lee and Terence Davies are tonally a million miles apart. But in terms of this, looking at this story, it's not necessarily got a very specific narrative arc. It's sort of like a series of memories threaded together, and sequences and set pieces, both very moving but very funny and uplifting, and some darker moments, and even a scene where a chihuahua gets pinged out of a fold-up bed. What a moment. I was really taken with it. And although Alfre is maybe playing a fairly conventional mother type, sort of that don't get on my bad side or I'll beat you child type mother figure, she brings incredible warmth, and it, again, like she does so often, makes so much more and elevates the material tremendously. But I mean, I fully recommend this. In terms of Spike Lee and my experiences with Spike Lee and how it sort of touches into things I love about cinema, I would put it as one of my favourite Spike Lee joints now.
God, I should have thought of this before. I can't think off the top of my head of a Spike Lee movie I don't like. Is that wrong? Is there something clear that I should be? But like, in terms of like, I have a warm feeling towards all the ones I have seen, and Crooklyn is no different. It's a good movie, but yes, I guess you are right in terms of when people suggest Spike Lee movies, Crooklyn is not on the top of that list.
Well, I'm going to vouch for it to go to the top of the list. That is my plea. Put Crooklyn to the top of the list if you're a Spike Lee fan and you've not come upon it before.
Yes,
because it's really different from other things he's done, and for that reason, it's absolutely worth it.
And then I guess we should really quickly touch on Cross Creek, because that is the only film, that's the only Oscar nomination she's got. And that was for Best Supporting Actress all the way back at the start of her career, where she plays a woman who arrives at Mary Steenburgen's house to say, like, let me work for you. Well, that's not what she says. She says,
I got to give work. I got use for my pay.
I don't think that you'd be satisfied so far from town.
Well, town ain't nothing to me.
I'm sure that it wouldn't suit you.
If I don't suit you, you can cut my throat.
She is a force, and it's such a shame, she is supporting, she is limited in her part, and although she has bits to do and whatnot, the film as a whole is very bland. I mean, I unless you were like an Oscar completist or an Alfre Woodard completist, I'm not sure I would recommend it.
In hindsight, it's a bit of a sort of nothing film. It's not, like you're saying, necessary to go back and revisit unless you're a completist. But she is great in it, and she does have those moments which sing purely because it's Alfre.
Yeah. So is it time to talk about the crowning glory? All dues to Renée Zellweger coming back and being Judy Garland in Judy, but how Alfre Woodard did not storm those awards for Best Actress, all of them, like, and win and just be like celebrated for not just Clemency but her career. But Clemency alone would be a reason to give anyone an award. Like, why do we have awards?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's absolutely batshit crazy that Clemency was swept under the rug, ignored. Whatever happened, perhaps there is fault to be put on distribution and timing and things like this, but this performance is absolutely undeniable. It can't be ignored. Yet it was, for some barmy-ass reason. It's so strange. It is, in terms of what she can bring and the what her career has led to. Clemency is certainly the crown jewel at this point of that singingly good career.
Yeah, I mean, she's in a lot of the film. Like, there's a lot to talk about, and we're not going to go into all of it. But her face, like, you talked about her eyes earlier, but her face and her eyes are just like amazing. Like that opening scene. So the opening scene, they botch up an execution, and there are people watching, witnesses to this execution. There's a man being executed, and Alfre is responsible for everything as the warden. It's not her fault that something's gone wrong, but it's certainly her responsibility to make sure it's sorted. And you can tell, like, there's panic in her eyes, there's like guilt, there's all these different emotions at the same time that are escalating and escalating as things get worse and worse and worse. It is, of course, mirrored at the end, where we've gone to the end of her journey, and what she's doing with her face in this like extended close-up. Like, I cannot think of many other performances that hit me in the same way as that. Even that one moment.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the only other scene, in terms of actually just giving someone the space to perform like that, the only other scene I can think of off the top of my head is Nicole Kidman in Birth, in that sequence in the theatre, where there's something else that is going on, but instead the camera just chooses to look into the eyes and face of the leading performer. And that's what's going on in the scene in Clemency. There's something vital that is going on, but you're getting it off of the face of Alfre at this point where basically I would suggest her world has sort of fallen beneath her. And as she is this person, as a death row warden, prison warden, but also death row warden, she obviously has a huge amount of weight which she's carrying every day, and is obviously, like people would in that role, is suffering from a huge amount of PTSD, which is affecting all facets of her life. And it's this sequence at the end where you just feel it all sort of give way, because up to this point she's giving it this sort of steel. She's presenting herself as not unwavering, because I think she's fair in certain ways, but she feels that she has a duty of responsibility to her role, and she's unwavering in how she must conduct herself in that role. And that's where the body language of this part comes in. She's very much arms behind back, wide legs when she's conducting this room where these executions are happening. And it's sort of a means... It's like a performance, basically. She's putting on this role that she has to appear in this way to make her job, to function, to allow herself to do this thing. She's playing a part, and you can feel this burden of responsibility. You talk about her eyes again. It's the same thing where she's doing so much in her eyes and her voice. It's sort of like you feel she's elsewhere when things are going on. And it's this amazing thing where she's doing one thing physically, but her eyes, and often when she's talking, her voice suggests that she's somewhere else. And that's really sublime work.
To be honest, I'm lost for words. So, like I was saying earlier, like I saw this in the film festival, and kind of just presumed when, like, as awards came or as more people saw it, there's no way that this is going to, I don't know, not or be ignored or not open doors or not do so many different things, not just for Alfre, but for just storytelling, because there's not many stories I can think of with a female character who, although she is a wife, and her being a woman is important in elements of it, it is such a rich character. Like, I just don't. It's so rare we get anything like that, and not like discovering themselves, which I think is kind of. It's an obvious one where you could go to, like, oh, she doesn't have a husband, or she doesn't have these things. She wants to find herself. This woman is not. She's trying just to deal with her occupation. It's incredible.
It is incredible, and yes, to sort of touch on that some more, yes, she is a woman, and that's very important. But there's so much just layers to what the writing and direction of this film. We should say it's Chinonye Chukwo's, not her debut feature, but certainly the first thing of kind of significant note that she has done. And it is incredible. And the space that she's giving this female character, I guess more to the point, is the other side of it, that she gets without leaning into things that lesser films might do. She spends a lot of time at the end of her shifts in a bar and having these really interesting conversations with her male counterparts and peers in this bar, yet it's not about her being a drunk or anything like that. She gets drunk, but that's not the issue. It is just showing this woman in this space that is otherwise dominated by the males who are working within the same facility as she is, and it's this time for her to vent and unwind. And that just adds such richness. Some of the conversations she has in that bar, it's just the most nuanced work from her, and also the writing.
How do you keep doing it?
I do my job. You want to play this good guys and bad guys. And I'm one of the bad guys. But I give these men respect, Marty. All the way through. I give them real world training for whenever some of them might get out. You can't save the world.
Alfre makes it seem like it just came out of her head. Like, it just seems so natural. And I'm not saying that. I think the film matches her in many ways, but I think she's the reason it works.
I agree. I think the film is certainly interesting around her, and also just flagging Aldous Hodge in this film as well, who's incredible, and someone else who deserves to have an absolute rise, because wow, he is so great in this. But
also, call me Aldous.
We're waiting.
Yeah, anytime.
But without, say, them, and very specifically her, yes, the film wouldn't be the same thing. I would go out there and say that it's certainly one of, or the best performance of the past 5 years.
I think it's like, I can't think off the top of my head, but I would say easily it's one of my favorite performances of all time. I'm running out of words. I don't know.
We need Aldous Hodge.
Sorry. It's Aldous Hodge who is distracted. I wish. No, I'm just lost for words. I just think she's incredible. There are loads of performances that I absolutely love, but that is one for the ages. And I do think with time that will be discovered. And it's also a very powerful film in terms of it is openly, reflecting on does, state executions work, or at all, and why would we do that, and without leaning too hard on either way, really. I mean, it's showing the effect it's having on her as being responsible for it, but it's not really telling you what's right or wrong. And that woman, she believes it's the correct thing to do. Like, she plays by the rules, as you said.
Yes. Exactly. But it's really interesting hearing Alfre talk about it, because she talks about her draw to this role as a desire to play an antagonist. And I would suggest that watching the film, she's not necessarily an antagonist, but in terms of it being the reverse of what Alfre believes in, and what Alfre has quite specifically in her life fought against. Like she said, she has campaigned with Snoop Dogg and Jamie Foxx in a very significant case to have an execution not happen a handful of years ago. It's something that she fights against. So therefore she sees this as an antagonist role, and that being the daughter, and that makes it all the more fascinating. And being an antagonist does not mean that you are not a human being, and there are not layers and not elements that are entirely relatable as there are in the character of Bernadine in Clemency.
No, it's terrific for so many reasons. It's like a gift of a performance.
100%. 100%. All right, let's take this in another direction. We've talked plenty about some cracking works, but just to break things up a wee bit, Michael, I have got a little quiz for you to see how much you know Alfre.
I feel like usually I love a game or a quiz, but for whatever reason, I feel like I just feel so, I don't know, I feel so nervous that I'm going to fuck it up. But yes, I'm here for it.
You won't fuck it up. Don't worry. Alfre is here for you regardless.
So what's the prize? Because it better be Aldous Hodge's number.
Oh, well, I couldn't quite get hold of Aldous Hodge's number, but let's just say if you do well in this, then you are going to be solely responsible for the rise in Alfre Woodard's career from this point on.
Okay, so not much pressure. Oh my god.
Just to add pressure onto the fact you were already feeling it. Okay, let's leap in with this one. Alfre holds the record as the most honoured African-American actress, like I said, in Emmy history. And in 1997, she won her third Emmy for the TV movie Mrs. Evers' Boys. Can you name the other 4 actresses she beat out in this wildly impressive lineup?
So, the first thing I did was look at this. I'm obsessed with awards, as you know. But it's only 3 people that are jumping to my mind, so this is really going to kill me when I don't know the 4th.
Well, I'll leave.
Okay. Well, of course, who do you want to beat if you're an actor? Meryl Streep. So then it was Glenn Close, because you'd want to. She's on the top of the table too. You'd want to beat her.
Mm-hmm.
Many have already at the Oscars. Ha ha ha.
Pause for
Sorry.
even more laughter.
Joke. Yeah. Where's the soundtrack of applause for that joke? I should say we are recording this before this year's Oscars. So if she has won, I'm sorry that I made that joke, and congratulations, Glenn. If not,
Glenn.
Well, you weren't going to win for Hillbilly anyway. So then there is Stockard Channing, whose name I'll always remember. It's on a list, but then I can't remember. I want to say Diane Keating, but it can't be. That's just a dream of a 5-some.
Oh no, I'm interested you got Stockard. I thought that that was maybe going to be the one you weren't getting. So then we've got an icon of British acting, and think of TV around about this time and you'll probably get it. A Dane.
A Dane. Well, here we go. Maggie, Judy, Helen, Kay. I didn't. Is it any of those?
One of the above, yes.
Maggie Smith, Judi Dench. Oh, Helen Mirren in Prime Suspect it would have been, or something.
You got it. That's exactly it. Helen Mirren for Prime Suspect. There we go. 4 for 4. You did it.
Amazing.
But that is a lineup, and
I was just going to say, I've seen Miss Evers' Boys, which she won this award for. That is incredible. Another incredible performance of hers, which of course we don't talk about here because there's so much film to talk about. But if you do want a TV movie that reveals a shocking part of American history, then go for it.
It's on the list. I will get it watched. Right. Alfre was considered for which part in a Quentin Tarantino film?
I know the answer because I've done my homework, but Mia Wallace. Can you, that would have been, her career would have been so different. I mean...
Whoa, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wow. I mean, Uma Thurman, of course, is perfect. Wonderful in Pulp Fiction. But fucking hell, imagine Alfre Woodard as Mia Wallace. Whoa! I mean, that's really something to have a little ponder over. Let's then circle back to Meryl Streep. Alfre and Meryl Streep have played the same role in two different incarnations of what?
Two different incarnations. The way you've worded that means like one of them did it on stage or something. I would love to say like, oh, go on. What were you going to say?
Well, no, yeah, not stage, but
screen.
One of them was film and one of them was TV.
Oh, sorry, there's two. So two, and are they real people?
No, it's not a real person.
Oh, so yeah. So not Julia Child. Or Margaret Thatcher. I would absolutely love to see Alfre do.
That's
Margaret
right.
Thatcher.
Alfre Woodard as Margaret Thatcher in the cult classic.
Meryl Streep. I don't know, actually. I couldn't tell you.
Meryl Streep was the first, and she played this character on film. Mm-hmm. And then far more recently, Alfre has played this character in a Netflix television series.
Okay. It's unfortunate. A series of unfortunate events. I would say, as much as I keep saying like Meryl's overrated, I absolutely love her in that movie. Like it's so like far out there. I'd love to see Alfre do that part. God, okay.
I didn't know. So she's Aunt Josephine in the TV version for Netflix of a series of unfortunate events. So we better get adding that to the list. Alfre acted alongside 9 other Oscar nominees in How to Make an American Quilt. How many can you name?
Winona Ryder.
1.
Ellen Burstyn.
2.
Oh, Gene Simmons.
Gene Simmons. 3.
Sorry, I'm like getting nostalgic because when the film started, I'd never seen it before this, and when I realized when I saw the cast list, I already was on board. And then when I saw that group of women like Gene Simmons and Maya Angelou and all these people, like I was a bit of a mess. But having said that, I'm really struggling with anyone else that was in the movie. Who's the man in it? Oh no, that's Dermot Mulroney. So he's not an Oscar nominee though, is he? Thank God. Not thank God. He's very good. Oh. He's very in About Schmidt. He's really like. There's so many movies he's good in. Sorry, Dermot. Also, call me.
After that, I think I'm more likely to be in the list.
Yeah, sadly, I've ruined it, haven't I? There's someone really good in it. I mean, there's loads of really good people, but there's someone like Anne Bancroft.
Yes.
Who plays Alfre Woodard's biological father, like Maya Angelou's like young love interest? It's a guy, and he's really it's a guy, but he is someone who became huge, and I just can't think of who it was. I want to say Joaquin Phoenix, but it's not him.
Okay.
It's a flashback, so it's like when they're talking about it, and
so maybe it is him. That's weird. I must not have been paying enough attention. Shame on me.
Is it Joaquin Phoenix?
It's not Joaquin Phoenix. No, it is. There is a younger guy, probably about the same age as Joaquin Phoenix, who has won an Oscar in a supporting role, and I'm not sure if it's him. It's in that part because I can't remember him in it.
Yeah, no, it's a tiny part, but I remember seeing him and thinking, "Wow, okay."
Was it Jared Leto?
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah, okay, yeah, Jared Leto. So he's one.
So who do I've left? I don't think I'd remember anyone else.
So you've got our pal from the swamp in Cross Creek, who was nominated for his work in Cross Creek. That's where he had his Oscar nomination. The man who lives in the swamp, shooting everything around.
Oh, okay, sorry. Rip Torn,
yeah. Then you have Richard Jenkins, Kate Nelson, who's really lovely in How to Make an American Quilt, and in Frankie and Johnny as well. And Melinda
Nelligan. Nelligan, you mean?
Nelligan, Kate Nelligan. Sorry, yes, Kate Nelligan.
So I got most of those.
All right. Well, I see you done well, and therefore Alfre Woodard's career is set to explode.
Well, yeah. Speaking of which, like as well, like we're now going to talk what we want for her, which I'm going to find hard because I think she is like she's getting all these opportunities. I want the world to change to focus on her. You know, like that is my problem with what's going on. Having said that, I mean, of course, I have suggestions. And before we go into it, like we should say, she is in the Russo brothers, like so the people behind the Marvel Avenger movies. Their next movie, like this $200 million budget Netflix thing. So hopefully, she has a kind of big part, and that's a big successful movie.
Let's hope so.
So yeah, what have you thought about, or what are you dreaming for, Alfre?
Okay, I mean, the first one is sort of a fairly straightforward one in that I basically want Chinonye Chukwu, who directed Clemency, to harness the goodwill that is rolling off of the back of Clemency far slower than it ought to, and team up with Alfre again, because if those two team up again and they strike gold of the same level, or if they can manage wonders, do even better, then hey girls, you've got Oscars all round. Because surely, I mean, you would think that Alfre should have been nominated for way more Oscars throughout her career than just the one for Cross Creek of all things. But the goodwill that's come off the back of Clemency, and she did just get nominated for the BAFTA. Yes, a year after the year at which the Oscars should have nominated her. But she did get there. So I think she's in people's headspace. And I think with the right combination, that'll work. And I do really want those two to do it again, because they came up with something really special here. So I'm going to start off with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd written that down too, because Clemency has so much right with it. I mean, it would only, even if it was like half the film it was, I would be happy to sit and watch that. Do you know, like, I think that's great.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, one of the films we haven't talked about that we did watch for this was Annabelle, or at least I watched for it. And I thought, actually, as bad as, so I'm not a horror fan, as I'm sure I've said before, but Annabelle strikes me as a pretty bad example of a horror movie, and I'd love to see her.
It's exceptionally bad.
Yeah, I'd love to see her in a great, like, kind of more, say, art house sort of horror movie, or when I say, I mean, socially conscious horror movie, something in the vein of a, like, I don't know, Rosemary's Baby or Us, or anything where she could be kind of I don't know, have a meaty role, either as a, like, the villain or the victim, or a mixture of the two. Any of that, I think, like, as we've talked about, like, she's so expressive with her face. To watch her go through something so intense as you usually would have a protagonist go through in a horror movie would be a gift to watch. Like, what could go wrong? Yeah. So
yeah, no, let me leapfrog on that and say that, like, you said Us, but surely she's ripe for a Jordan Peele casting. I mean, I think if we say that loud enough and wish that hard enough, that could come into being. Please, Alfre Woodard in a Jordan Peele film, please. Okay.
Well, he seems to be, like, creating a dream movie with, like, Stephen Yen, and isn't Daniel Kaluuya in it, and so I mean, the dream can only keep getting bigger if he starts adding Alfre into it, or the next film, like, whatever with Jordan Peele. It wouldn't have to be horror; it could be anything. I mean, to be honest, I would link her. There is not one filmmaker that I can think of that I'm like, don't work with them. Like, I'd have her work with anyone. Like Quentin Tarantino. Completely. Like, how good would it be if she did finally get to work with Quentin Tarantino in, like, a properly good female role in his films?
Absolutely.
But
just any of them, because I mean, she has rarely done, I guess, what you would describe as auteur, or certainly work with auteur directors. So yes, come on, let's get her cast in something good like that. But kind of going off the back of then genre work, like we said earlier, she does prove herself, and certainly in Miss Firecracker and a couple of other films as well. She proves herself as really, really good at comedic work. So I'm really wanting to put the the feelers out for her in a comedy film, and I'm suggesting a Kristen Wiig big budget comedy number and get her to use the more absurdist side which she has channeled before. Like if she was in like a Barb and Star or something, like that would be so much fun. She'd be perfect because she does play wacky really well, and I think she'd actually it doesn't feel like a stretch to think of her really excelling in something like that and being an absolute hoot.
Yeah, I think anything silly like that, like I had actually written down like Popeye the movie, so not Popeye the Sailor Man, but Popeye, her character from Miss Firecracker, because there's just so much fun you could have with a part like that where she's kind of let loose. It's just so much fun, and you can tell she's having fun with it. And I do think Juanita kind of leans into it with the Blair Underwood sections where she's imagining their conversations and stuff and talking directly to camera. But yeah, imagine like Kristen Wiig or any of those sorts of people who made the Bad Trip movie, the Netflix thing. But that sort of, imagine her in that.
That would be fun. I would certainly buy a ticket for that. What about you? What else you got there?
Well, because I'm not a huge Marvel head, when I read Russo Brothers, it instantly made me think of like my brother directing team of choice, which would be the Safdie brothers, who, if people who have, think of what Robert Pattinson is doing, what is that movie? Robert Pattinson in
Good Time.
Which time?
Good Time.
A Good Time, not a bad time. So what Robert Pattinson's doing in Good Time, or what Adam Sandler's doing in Uncut Gems, like Alfre would be so good in that sort of, again, intense sort of environment. It's kind of all like leaning on that main character's story. So I just kind of dreamed about that. And I also dreamed because she sings even a little bit. You know, you said Juanita. She what's the name of that Robert Downey Jr. movie? She sings like a little
Heart
lullaby.
and Souls. Yeah, she has a really nice moment where she sings, which I thought too. Like we should get her musical, right?
Yeah, well, a movie that is apparently being made in development or is in development is Stephen Sondheim's Follies, which has like an array of strong female parts. Which Alfre, to be honest, could do any of them. So there was like a very silly one she could do, or big. I mean, I would cast her properly, like. Because I'm totally in love with her as Sally. So Sally would be the main one. She's the one that sings Losing Her Mind. She's kind of this downbeat woman that arrives in the theater and is like, oh, I'm in love with this other man and my life's been a waste. And but there'd be a lot for her to do. The truth is, I'm not sure her voice is strong enough for that. But, why not? Why not give her something like that?
No. I'm all on board for that. That's like heaven. That's perfection. Another one I popped down just because I can see it happening, and I think she has played cop types before, but I would love to see her in a really good buddy cop movie. And I'm not thinking of, as much as I like it, like Heat, the Melissa McCarthy, Sandra Bullock film. I am actually thinking like throwback 80s Lethal Weapon, Die Hard with a Vengeance type thing, where it can be light and it can have these fun moments because I want to see her in a role where she gets to have fun, but where there's a lot more grit under its nails and things. I think there could be something really good there because she could color in that character to be something wonderful. So I'm on the buddy cop movie for Alfre Woodard train now.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, I'd have her do any project she wanted. I would have just green light them, just everybody, give her the money, let them, because like I think her career or the films that she has got to make are just so fascinating. Even things that we've not talked about, like Beauty Shop, like she's making all these really interesting, varied choices, and I just can't that's why I'm like, I don't know what I'd suggest. I'm just suggesting on top of whatever she'd do, because I would never be like, oh, you should do these things.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, then here, maybe to end on this note with this part is then more leading roles, please. As simple as that. More leading roles for Alfre Woodard, because why not? like, Jesus Christ. Like, come on. More leading roles for Alfre, and they can be anything as long as it's good, which it will be if she gets her hands on it.
Even Margaret Thatcher. Honestly, now that we have it in our heads, it's like her playing like Julia Child or Margaret Thatcher. Let's have it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to miss, like, I genuinely am going to miss thinking about Alfre Woodard.
Oh, yeah. Well, let her always be in your heart and in your head. She's been handled in only the podcast form, but she lives on otherwise. So don't you miss her too much, because she's around.
So if anybody wants to tell us what their favorite Alfre performances are, or, you know, that can be TV, film, whatever, or want to criticize us and tell us how we were incorrect, you can let us know at an email at don'tknowherpod@gmail.com, or we're on social media. Our handle is don'tknowherpod, don'tknowher_pod. Is that correct?
That is correct. Don't know her _pod. You can get us on Twitter and Instagram. Drop us a line as well and let us know if there's somebody that you think has been flying under the radar that we should spread our love for. Alfre, for now, we love you.
Bye.
Peace out. Bye-bye, Michael.